Director of Boy Erased, Joel Edgerton.
Hi, good. How are you?
Good.
Nice to meet you.
So I'm a little breathless. We were driving out of town before someone realised they'd been given the wrong directions. I was like, I'm certain this festival's not that big.
Yeah, no.
Like, surely we can contain it within the city.
Neighborhood, yes. Okay, we were just chatting about films people have liked at the festival, so we're keeping it nice and light after that
Did the film finish like an hour ago or something?
No, like
Okay.
a couple of minutes. So, Joel, I thought I would just start out by asking you how you became familiar with Garrett's story and how I know you worked a lot with GLAAD on the making of this film, and just maybe if you could talk a little bit about all of those collaborations.
I was looking for a second project. I'd made a movie before a few years ago, and I'd come out the other end of that without really knowing what I wanted to do. And quite often I like to leave an empty space and see what speaks to me. And so people send scripts, and I like to think that I'm just going to create something of my own. And I was sent a book, Garrett's book, by Kerry Roberts, who is one of the producers of the movie, or the producer of the movie. And I read it because I was interested in weird stuff. And you know, talk about coming to a book with one kind of interest and coming out of it with a completely different whole other landscape of thoughts and ideas. I went in there because I love prisons. I don't love them. I love them because I hate them. I used to, as a child, pray that I would never go to prison, that never go to war, that I would never get abducted, that I'd never be in a cult. And so now as a grown-up, I'm pretty certain nobody wants to abduct me anymore. And I would fight real hard. But I'm interested in those stories. And I think it's because I felt so safe with my parents, and I was worried that someone would take me away from that. And so I'm interested in movies about that stuff. So I read the book because of those interests. And what I came out of it with was realizing that the concept of being taken away from your parents, if that was your parents taking you away from themselves, is can I swear in here? I guess I can. It's live. It's a fucking devastating thing. The people that you most look up to and that are your heroes growing up, and my dad was that to me, and my mum is a hero of emotion to me, the idea that they could turn to me and say that there's something wrong with me would be the most disorienting thing. And the book made me very upset, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, and so I got involved. When it comes to GLAAD, sorry, I talk too much, because I felt like I wasn't the right person to tell the story initially, and quite bluntly, because I'm a straight, guy, I was like, why am I thinking so much about this story? And somebody's got to make it. I want to be involved somehow, but from the shadows. And I started writing scenes from the movie. Nobody was interested in the rights for the book, which made me feel more safe to step forward. And then I started writing scenes. I ended up writing the screenplay, and it was important to me to not only send the screenplay to Garrett, every step of the way, and to have a constant communication with him, but also we sent that screenplay to GLAAD. And I'm sure you all know who GLAAD are. And they have a policy where they, as a free service, because you don't pay for it, they will read your screenplay and say, this is good representation, or I'm being very simplistic, or you need to go away and think about a couple of things.
Did you work with, you worked a lot with Garrett, obviously. Did you speak with anybody else that had been through similar experiences or visit any of these places?
Yeah. So my research mainly was a book, constant conversation with Garrett. One of my second meeting with him was with him and a survivor of a conversion therapy place that operated out of Jersey that beautifully, thankfully, is shut down. That was a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court 5 survivors took down their therapists. That was an out-and-out abuse situation. I mean, like, we'll help your child who's been abused and has issues, and then terrible things happened. I went and met my character, who's based on a guy called John Schmidt, who ran the therapy. The only person I've ever met who's come out twice. Ex-gay, he refers to himself. The blue shirts, as I refer to them in the movie, the staff, a lot of them are identify as ex-gay. John was gay. He met somebody in Omaha when he was in his early 20s. She told him that God wouldn't love him. He explored Christianity and he went back into the closet, and his way of solidifying his self-belief was to stay in the program and to become the most powerful man at Exodus International, which ran Love in Action. I had lunch with him and his husband, Larry, at a Cracker Barrel, strangely enough. And if you don't know much about Cracker Barrel, they're not very supportive of LGBTQ people. One of the wonderful things on the production was we had a list of places you don't go to because they don't support LGBTQ people. And I found it very ironic that John, with his husband, wanted to meet me at a Cracker Barrel. That meeting survivors, talking to a wonderful guy called Morgan who'd made a documentary about LIA, about his experience, and inviting all of those people, if they were willing, except for John, because I didn't want to make Garrett spend time with his ex-therapist, to come and be in the movie. Like, come and be in scenes, like, be an extra, come and hang out, like, be around as much as you can and want to.
Are there any questions from the audience? There are many more I can ask, but yes, in the front row, go ahead.
How did you come up with the concept of like the hand and the symbolism of him being free from his parents?
How did I come up with the symbolism for the hand coming out of the window? I mean, you know, there are little fictionalized elements of this that I brought in. Namely, the biggest one is Cameron, the creation of the character of Cameron, which I asked Garrett's approval of, and Schmidt's advice. I kind of told him, like, I'm going to depict you as a part of a fake funeral with respect, because so many people have killed themselves because of what you saw on screen. And he gave me his, like, you have to do that, because he admitted that many people that he'd mentored had, one in particular had killed himself. And when John first posted his apology on Facebook, one person's reply was just a list of people that were now dead. And he wears that scar. He tries to atone for it, but, you know, it's hard. He has to reinvent his history in his mind in order to cope with what he did. The hand out the window, there's so much about Garrett's life, despite my own life, that I relate to. The size of his town, how homophobic the place that I grew up in was, that I had a religious sort of time in my life where God was watching me every minute and I was terrified. And my mum and dad, strangely, are very similar to Garrett's mum and dad. My dad kind of rules the family. He's a beautiful man. He's actually flying in tonight. His flight's delayed. And my mum is more like Nancy, and my mum told me lots of lies when I was a kid to protect me, and that was one of them. The other one was, she said, you can't pee in the garden because a bird will come and eat your pee-pee. Which stopped me from peeing in the garden, but she should have encouraged me, right, because plants will thrive. The other one was, don't sleep on your brother's floor, because I love my brother so much I used to sleep on his floor, because the spiders that live under his bed will come and carry you away. And now I'm 44, I know that's not true. But the hand out the window was definitely it. I love the way parents fret for their kids. And, you know, if you ever get a chance to meet Martha, it's amazing how a mouse can turn into a lion when it comes to a child. She's a very, you'd pass her off as a person. She's, you know, a Southern woman who very much kind of is in the shadow of her husband. She rules her family now. and she rules it because she loves Garrett and she accepts him. And her husband is a minister. And if you're a minister, you don't want your wife to divorce you. And not that she plays that game like dishonestly, but she's willing and she runs that family.
The actors that played that family in the film are incredible, and you give a terrific performance as well. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you helped them create that family dynamic that is at once, very close and then has a, great divide.
Nicole and Russell are very smart people. Lucas is incredibly smart at a young age. Nicole lives in Nashville. She knows a lot about the mentality and the attitude and the beliefs and has respect for that. She also has her own history, as she told me, which I didn't delve much further into, about, when you have to pit belief against your children, which is quite fascinating. And Russell flew down to Arkansas. He got to know Herschel, the real father. Flew down. Can you imagine being in a 70-person strong corrugated iron church in Arkansas? And Russell Crowe just walks in and sits up the back, and he had lots of conversations with Herschel, and Herschel gave him his blessing. It's a very complicated thing for the father, obviously, knowing that this film is going to be made and that Gladiator was going to play him, because it suddenly made it seem like a bigger deal with more eyes and more bums on seats than it would have been as a sort of an independent movie that would slide away to nothing. Which, as a side note, was part of the reason for the casting of the film. I was like, this film has to be seen by as many people as possible. And I want to find 2 actors to play the parents that America identifies with. Because they go, if Russell and Nicole are in it, maybe I'll tiptoe into the cinema and see what this is about. But they did their research. Everybody did their research. And, that's what actors do. And that's why you're lucky if you get to work with people that are very masterful, because actors solve problems. They want to make themselves look good, and they do the best for the movie.
There was a couple of questions. I saw some hands before, just in the white shirt in the break row there. Yeah.
So I think it's an incredibly powerful film, and it'll change lives. Personally, I wouldn't refer to the people who ran the program as therapists or therapy, because that's meant to be helpful, and this is hurtful. To me, there was an incredible message of feminism in it. Was that intention as you started, or did that just kind of unfold as you were writing the screenplay?
I just recognised that in meeting Garrett's mother, just the transformation of being somebody who was at the whim and the behest and kind of swaying on the agenda of the men around her, made her own decision. And sometimes, people who have a small voice, who shout loudly all of a sudden, are very interesting to me. My mother's a very pleasing person, like Nancy is. She wants everybody around her to feel comfortable. And I've seen a couple of times in my life where people pushed her too far, and it was terrifying. And there's a strength in everybody. People go to war and you think you might be a good soldier. You never know until you're in the middle of a battle. And when people get tested, it's very interesting. And I wouldn't necessarily call that feminism. I'd call it just human nature. And it just so happened that this beautiful woman who's tiny and kind of like you might write her off. There was a beautiful time when David, my long-time assistant and now co-producer, and he plays Michael in the film. For his sins, I cast him as my assistant in the movie. He was talking about RuPaul's Drag Race to Martha, her real name is, on the rooftop of a New York apartment. And she listened attentively for minutes and minutes and minutes. And then she said, "Oh, my God, David, I had no idea you knew so much about female drag racing." thinking the whole time he was talking about a very sort of southern kind of pastime about, you know, women driving cars and trying to puzzle it together, you know, racing each other. So, you know, intelligence is not ever defined by one angle. Intelligence is emotional. Intelligence is, I mean, you know, scholarly intelligence or you know, learned intelligence is almost like, to me, the lowest form. It's like we all, if we have access to that, great. Emotional intelligence and making a choice despite circumstances around you, to me, is one of the greatest strengths of intelligence. And she embodies that. And never write anybody off is a really great lesson when you meet her.
We have time for one more question. I know we can go to, you've had your hand up for a while. Yeah.
Look, one answer to that is I'd made another movie before, and it gave me the opportunity to not have to wait so long for people to read screenplays and get invested. Casting my first film was really tricky because people don't, you know, is this a vanity project? Are you really going to see this thing through? Are you going to be any good at what you've done? At least that was a kind of like a calling card. It's amazing what people respond to. You know, Nicole read it immediately, was really drawn to the material. Russell had his own reasons too. And I got a cast very quickly. I mean, I didn't have to go to any second choices. It was very blessed. In fact, it was quite terrifying because I was like, oh shit, now I've got to make the movie. Like, nobody's wasting my time enough to, you know, because it's easy to sort of make excuses to why you don't actually want to get to the starting line of making a movie. There was such an incredible support. There's a woman who played Cameron's mother. She's in a tiny scene at the fake funeral. She was like desperate to be involved with the movie. She'd had a son who'd come out, and it ruined her marriage because her husband couldn't accept her son. So she just didn't accept that. There were lots of stories that came to us, and people within the LIA group in particular, who all had their own narrative for the movie, which we would sit down and discuss. And the reason they had that narrative was because I needed them all, silent or not, dialogue or not, to have a response to every day. And most of those narratives reflected in some part their own life. So, you know, there was just the incredible warmth and interest, and people were on their toes to get involved.
I started off this introduction by reiterating the mission of TIFF, which is to transform the way people see the world through film. And I think, as you pointed out, you really hoped your film would do that. And I know that it did for me while watching it. I hope it did for all of you. Thank you so much for coming with it and for being part of this. Thank you guys for staying.